Continue boarding flight 1235 to Grenada, inviting our Advantage Gold, Platinum, Executive Platinum aircraft members. May also proceed on board.
They said that 95% of our population is black, and they had a correct statistic. And if we have 95% of predominantly African origin in our country, then we can have a dangerous appeal to 30 million black people in the United States.
Grenada, we were told, was a friendly island paradise for tourism. Well, it wasn't. It was a Soviet-Cuban colony being readied as a major military bastion to export terror and undermine democracy. We got there just in time.
All Grenadians are asked to report immediately to our respective militia bases. All doctors, nurses, and medics report to the hospital immediately. Our country is under attack.
The situation in the country was instigated into a hysteria by operatives on assignment from the government of the United States.
Embassy of Grenada.
Just look at it this way. You have this situation where we are trying to build a new society. We are trying to develop new attitudes, new values. We are literally trying to create a new man and a new woman. At the same time as you try to create a new image and these new values and new perspectives, you have to compete with your radio stations. Hundreds of them just beaming in their rubbish every day, encouraging people to develop more and more of a Coca-Cola mentality, encouraging them to believe that the only important thing is to have more to consume, to be purely materialistic.
This is serious, man. There's nothing else would have done this sort of damage but a bomb.
And that really is one of the main tasks that the revolution is grappling with. This vision of a new man and a new woman living in their society under new conditions with totally new values that they come to accept as second nature. Not too sure if there's much more I can say.
I'm getting this impression that you don't think I know any of it.
That's the reality. There's a lot we didn't tell you, and we won't.
No, there is a lot. We can just I'm going to talk to you.
Yeah, and you'll discover stuff. But if we see that in your interpretation of that discovery will put you in a bad space, then yes, I'm going to speak up. And that's how I work.
That's fine. Well, that's why you're here.
That's my point. There's a lot we didn't tell you. understand the emotional impact that we're going through. Coming in on that plane last night was very emotional for us. You know, the last time I was in that airport, we were going on a military plane. And my thoughts immediately went to the young people who gave their lives or are spending the rest of their lives in prison behind that airport. And so that was very emotional. I took my young children out of my country to come here to help this country. I left in pain. This is the first time I've been back, so you've got to be very sensitive. One reason we said not to put our stuff on you is that you may find answers to stuff that we still don't know. So why should we lay our stuff on you? Is that you, intellectual, and in your own way, can find answers to questions that we still are struggling with.
In 1999, my mother and I traveled back to the island of Grenada for the first time in 16 years. I was a graduate student making a film about my family's short time on the island. My mother, who was always looking for a better life for my sister and I, had moved us from Oakland, California to be part of Grenada's peaceful revolution in 1983. Little did we know that in less than a year, we'd end up hiding under a bed when the United States invaded. The film was unfinished and sat for many years until, while helping my mother move, I discovered a box filled with family history and old cassette tapes, documents, reels of Super 8 film, and photos. I realized my unfinished film wasn't just about an island. It was about why we moved to Grenada in the first place, how my mother was raised, and how she raised me.
If you're not trying to be somebody, if you're not trying to advance yourself,
they think you ain't nobody. My grandmother, Victoria Haughton, who grew up in the segregated South, moved to California, where she worked assembling tiles for the space shuttle. She and my grandfather raised a family of 5.
I'm Fannie Haughton, your mother. My father, my daddy always called me Fannie Mae. In the South, your name is just not your first name, it's your first and middle name. My parents are from Louisiana. They were part of the Great Migration.
The Great Migration. More than 5 million African Americans moved away from the segregated South, looking to build a better life in other parts of the country. For years, I had questions for my mother. Questions that I was afraid to ask. Turns out many of the stories I'd heard growing up that seemed so ordinary were a matter of life and death.
In the 1950s, when black families traveled from California to Louisiana, they traveled in groups. Families would drive across country together for safety. We would only stop for gas. Mother would pack a cooler full of food that we would be able to eat. As an adult, I understood why they didn't want us to experience the segregation of the South. So we really were sheltered from those experiences.
When I was a kid, my gram still cooked lunches for our family road trips, long after segregation was illegal. Why would you want to tell your children stories that hurt? But not learning why and how things are the way they are makes for another kind of hurt. When my family moved, our history became scattered and disjointed, memories passed on from one distant relative to another. All the family lived on one road. It was family land. They were sharecroppers originally. For many generations, my family had been born and raised on this road in Geismar, Louisiana. This is my great-grandmother, Sidonia Coco, born in 1896. She was the mother of 10 children. The family road was named in her honor, Coco Road.
So all this land is family land?
Yeah,
So how did the family end up with all this land?
sharecroppers.
So the whole family was sharecroppers?
They started here, and then they just sharecropped this whole. From what I understand, you have to ask Grams.
I used to work doing potatoes, picking up potatoes and stuff. We wasn't sharing this old white man's land, the one I just can't stand today. The big belly rascal, he wanted you to not stop picking up potatoes. He wanted you to keep on going. We had to go out there and we worked. But we could bring all the potatoes home that we wanted. Sharecropping, you might have your own house, but the big house is their house, the owner house, the white man's house. You worked for them, but then you had a part of their land to do what you want to do with it when you had a chance to do. On his land.
But he owned it.
He owned it, yeah.
The system of sharecropping came to dominate agriculture across the cotton-picking South.
Much of the work is still done by hand.
This was basically slavery, by another name.
One crop, cotton.
Oh, there are 5 of us. My older sister, Leona, and I'm the second. And then my brother, Warren Jr., and then Raymond and Judy, the last 2. But there were 5 of us growing up in Los Angeles. Daddy was a hard worker. Saved his money and bought a house. I mean, that was what you do. Daddy was a roofer. I mean, at that time, South Central was a recently integrated community. Mother tells the story most recently to us that, and I didn't know this before, when we first moved into that neighborhood, we were the first black family. Daddy would have to take her and Leona to a friend's house during the day because someone left a note on the door that says, "We don't want you niggas here." And so Daddy said she couldn't stay. She and Leona couldn't stay at the house by themselves during the day while he was at work. People were migrating from the South to get away from segregation and also for jobs. I mean, Mother and Father had high school diplomas, but they encouraged us to study. And I wanted to go to Washington High. And because Daddy lived in a neighborhood, I was able to go to Washington High. We were the first group of black students to go to Washington High School. I was excited to be in this integrated setting, one of the top schools, and because I was a good, at least I thought I was a good student. I wasn't as sharp as some of the other kids, the white kids coming in. But again, I worked hard. I worked double hard. And I just studied all the time. And at Washington, of course, you were preparing to go to college or deciding what you wanted to do. And so I remember going to the high school counselor planning for my college applications. And I was pretty much told that I was not college material. As a matter of fact, I applied to Cal State and didn't apply to UCLA because the counselor didn't encourage me to. But after 2 years, or 1 year at Cal State LA, I had friends at UCLA and I wanted to be around my friends. So I applied to UCLA and got in immediately. Just as I applied to UCLA, the Black Student Union started, and I became very active in the Black Student Union. We were asking for more Black Studies programs because we were the first large group of African American students to go to the major universities. On that campus, we asked for courses to be more inclusive and beginning to define what that meant. And so there was a coalition of all the Black student unions around the LA area that came together and called the Black Student Alliance. And so we would have meetings, and a lot of the work we did was talking to members in the community about the war in Vietnam and all the other political things happening. We were organizers because we would say, we're going to go like the Jehovah's Witness on Sunday afternoon and knock on doors and talk to people about what's happening in the world. The entire country was in transition. A lot of the activism from us, and the white students as well, we were trying to make sense of this world. And because I was raised in a Baptist church, that you give service, and that was just an extension of that. world is not as nice as our parents taught us.
Somebody forgot to tell somebody something. Then, the violence came even closer to home.
At the University of California at Los Angeles, 2 Black Panthers were shot to death during a black students' meeting on the campus last Friday.
I was on UCLA's campus when the 2 Panthers were killed. I just happened to be in Campbell Hall that day, and I actually had just left the building. Black Student Union had organized classes, and we were looking for a chairman. And there was an argument between those that were close to the Panther Party, those that was part of the US organization. And supposedly this argument caused these murders to happen in Campbell Hall. For a college student, you go to college to learn, but to have shooting on campus, that's unreal.
I'm not sure what she knew then, but it's public record now. In 1971, secret FBI files were unsealed. COINTELPRO, the FBI's counterintelligence program, was designed to destabilize the Black Panther Party. The documents revealed that the FBI instigated the murders on campus that day by sending anonymous letters between the 2 organizations. These manufactured letters had intended to spread the rumor that one leader had a contract out to kill the other. After the shootings and the attacks on the Panther Party, my mom and students at UCLA attempted to pick up the pieces.
After Bunchy and John were killed at UCLA, the Panther Party's office was shut up or shut down on Central Avenue. There was no one to run the breakfast program. The students at UCLA took over that breakfast program for a period of time.
We're gonna serve these children. We're gonna feed them every morning. All the Black Panther Party has done is taking the basic needs of people, putting them into practice.
I think the major impact for me at that time was when Angela Davis was hired on campus. I was a good student, but I wasn't a scholar, and I had never been around anyone who was a scholar, who read and studied.
It would be possible for you to do research on, not only in Bank of America, but Chase Manhattan, and all of the big banks and big, industrial companies in this country, and find that they're, very much interconnected. And it becomes a little bit clear exactly what Lennon is talking about when he talks about, the total concentration of capital in the hands of very, very few men.
I was fascinated with this young Black woman that was highly, highly educated, that spoke both French and German. When Angela even smoked a pipe.
A lot of people talk about political involvement versus personal. One of the most important things that has to be done in the process of carrying out a revolutionary struggle is to merge those 2 different levels, to merge the personal with the political, where they're no longer separate.
I began to work with her as her assistant in her first philosophy course.
Now, I maintain that political opinions should be brought into the classroom. They belong in the classroom. Education should not mold the mind according to a prefabricated architectural plan. It should rather liberate the mind.
I met Fannie at the very beginning of the year at UCLA. I was impressed not only by her intelligence, but by her passion, and I asked her if she would serve as my teaching assistant. She was an intellectual companion, and at the same time, a comrade, an activist comrade. Of course, by the time I arrived on campus, there was a lot of tumult.
Yesterday was the first day of the fall term at UCLA, and philosophy professor Angela Davis was on her way to teach her first class. Amid controversy, for Miss Davis admitted that she is a member of the Communist Party, and the regents who run the university decided because of that she should not be allowed to teach. Governor Reagan led the opposition to her.
Ronald Reagan and the crew was upset because Angela was a member of the Communist Party. The politics of California said, no, you cannot teach here. And they decided to fire her, and they did.
Fannie became very much involved in the effort to defend my right to teach. There were rallies and demonstrations, and I also had to have security at that point 24 hours a day because there were death threats. I was pretty much fired before I even had the opportunity to give my first lecture.
Ronald Reagan, actor, cowboy. He would become a recurring character in my family's life. A right-wing supporter of COINTELPRO and a new conservative hero. His mission to fire Angela from UCLA meant my mom lost her job too. Our family's lives were defined by how we defended ourselves against his policies. As governor, Reagan initiated an unprecedented expansion of the California state prison system, which he later privatized as president. Angela and my mom became aware of a political prisoner named George Jackson. Held in Soledad prison, he became known as one of the Soledad brothers.
George Jackson, age 29.
Convicted of stealing $72 from a petrol station.
Sentence 1 year to life. Term served 11 years, 7 months, 7 years in solitary confinement. January 1970, charged with the murder of a prison guard. Future, if convicted, death row.
Well, I was incarcerated under a 1 to life. A term they called for 1 to life, where I could have done 1 year and been released. I've done 10.
Miss Jackson, George Jackson's mother, and his brother Jonathan had come on campus to meet with Angela about the Soledad brother case. We began that Free the Soledad Brothers committee, and I decided to go to a hearing in Soledad. And that was an eye-opener because I had never been around prisoners. And I'll never forget seeing these 3 young men walk into that courtroom chained. They had chains around their wrists and their arms, and their feet were chained. You can hear the chains rattling on the floor.
My mother went to court that day with Angela and her sister Fania. Just a few months later, in the summer of 1970, all of their lives would change forever.
I remember still, reading the headlines about the August 7th takeover of the courtroom. Jonathan Jackson took over the courtroom in Marin County in the Civic Center and freed a couple of prisoners, took hostages, judge, jurors, district attorney. And of course, they were implicating Angela because they said the guns were registered to her, the guns that Jonathan Jackson used. Jonathan Jackson was kind of on her bodyguard team. He had access to all of the guns that she purchased in her name for her bodyguards. They charged her with murder and conspiracy to murder.
Afraid she wouldn't get a fair trial, Angela went underground. My mom and Fania, they'd been planning a trip to Cuba. And what better time to go?
Well, let me start from Los Angeles. That was the summer of 1970, August. We got in a car to go from Los Angeles to San Francisco, and from San Francisco we would take the bus to go to Canada to catch the boat to Cuba for the 3rd Venceremos Brigade. So we were in this car, and Fannie and I are sitting in the back. Fannie, every once in a while, would say, "Look, those cars are following us." And then she'd say, "Look, they're helicopters." I said, "Fannie, come on, you're just being paranoid. They're not following us, they're not following us." But she insisted. And indeed, by the time we got to San Francisco, cops were just swarming. They were everywhere. They were on the roof, coming into the windows. They were on the ground, outside. They thought I was Angela.
This is around the same time that Angela they were looking for Angela. We raised enough money to take a Greyhound bus from the cross country to get on the ship to go to Cuba. I was excited about going because Angela had gone. I remember Daddy was totally upset because we were going to work in the sugarcane fields. So we bought, work clothes to go to Cuba. Of course, my parents thought I had lost my mind. And I can imagine how worried they were because they didn't know where I was going when I was coming back.
Communist Cuba was Reagan's enemy, but so were the Panthers and their free breakfast program. Maybe on the other side of the propaganda, there was another truth, a better way to live. This was my mother's first time outside of the United States.
There was a cross-racial mix of people. We all went down together, and we didn't work the sugarcane fields. We worked in the Isle of Youth when we fertilized the orange trees.
The Isle of Youth is an important experiment in the history of the Cuban Revolution. and experiment in creating the conditions for a new society. For those who come to these camps, it is an opportunity to do physical work and to live communally with different kinds of people.
Cuba was an eye-opener again because we were never taught that there were black people in Cuba. And you get off the ship and you see people that look like Granddaddy. You know, and the majority of the people look like us. We had people from Guinea-Bissau, people coming from all over the world to talk to us about what was happening in their country. Some people try to say they indoctrinated us, but I don't think so. I think it's political information more so than anything.
The universities will no longer be isolated, but will be where the people are. In this way, the distinction between manual worker and intellectual is broken down.
Back in the United States, Angela was captured by the FBI. My mom and Fania headed home to organize the movement for Angela's freedom.
When I was arrested, Fannie became one of the key people in the campaign to defend my life.
There was an international movement developing around Angela. And I worked as chairman of the Free Angela Committee. We raised money for me to go to the Soviet Union to talk about Angela. So there was a delegation of 3 black women that went to the Soviet Union, and the primary purpose was to talk about Angela's defense. We were actually invited to give speeches around Angela Davis. Angela was imprisoned in San Rafael at that time. She was in the Bay Area, and so those of us that were key organizers around her defense moved to the Bay Area. We were so committed to making change that we may not have come out alive. It wasn't like I was just being a political activist. I was actually working and being a political activist. I worked in the public schools and the daycares, and I was the opening teacher. I opened the daycare center at 6 a.m., and I would leave at 2 and go work in the Angela Committee office. I learned a lot because we worked with some seasoned organizers, like Charlene Mitchell.
Charlene Mitchell was the first black woman to run for president of the United States. She mentored my mom and Angela.
Charlene taught me how to organize. And I remember Charlene saying, you need to understand the folks that you're working with. You can't expect everyone to buy in at the same political level. For instance, I was an AKA, and I had been part of the Baptist church. And Charlene says, put your suit on, go to your sorority meetings, talk about Angela's right for a free trial. They're not going to support her politics, but they will support the right of a young African-American, highly educated woman to have a free trial. And that's how that committee grew the way that it did. But that came from the teaching of someone, those old organizers like Charlene Mitchell. Angela was acquitted. That was when I got pregnant, I guess, and that's when it all...
Oh, you just skipped a whole bunch of stuff.
I don't even know what happened. I can't even remember.
Wait a minute. When did you meet Daddy and stuff?
I don't talk about, that's not even that important.
I just want to know. Huh? What happened?
I met him at a party.
Well, who?
I'm not, that's not part of my story, Damani.
It's part of my story.
Born in Denver, Colorado, my dad, Preston Baker, met my mother in Oakland, California. He had just returned from serving in the Vietnam War as a medic.
How does somebody make you go out and make war against someone else? Take one person here and put a gun in their hand. Another person over here and put a gun in their hand. Yeah, you have a pretty clear choice there. War is ugly. So I've never been a warmonger, I guess. I've never been one that sees war as a means to an end. Call me a pacifist, I guess. I had a little bitterness in me because I saw where governments didn't tell the truth. I guess that kind of hurts a little bit. You have to ask yourself why. Why am I here? Why is it I'm put in a position where I could die.
Any last thoughts, comments, ideas?
I don't know. Let's have dinner.
Growing up in Oakland was amazing. While my mom was teaching and earning her master's degree in early childhood development, our house was always filled with children. We had our own little village. We were the children of the struggle.
After I had you and Kai, I made an active choice to be a mother more so than an activist, because you can't do both well. I was consumed with going to work and taking care of you two. I never cut off my relationship with my activist friends. I became the person that they would drop the children off at my house if they were going to a meeting, because they knew that I would take care of the children.
All of that began to change in 1980.
I, Ronald Reagan, do solemnly swear
that I will faithfully execute the office of President of the United States.
that I will faithfully execute the office of President of the United States.
All of a sudden, the drugs came in so heavy. It was scary, but it destroyed the entire city of Oakland. I mean, there's some discussion now where that came from. Entire Black communities were destroyed. With all of my efforts to put you in a good school and try to balance it, there was still, we could sit on that hill in East Oakland and hear gunfire all down the hill all night. It was very disappointing to see all the work that we've done being overrun by drugs. It was not a happy time in the Black community anywhere in the States. That was not an environment to raise children.
I was invited to go to Grenada by the NCBL, the National Conference of Black Lawyers. Angela happened to also be there around the same time because she was invited by the government to come and speak on International Women's Day, which was March.
In the summer of 1982, my mother went on a trip to Grenada. She went with Fania, Angela, and the Davis family. She brought along a tape recorder. I found those tapes in that box of family history.
I'd like to ask Sister Angela to make a few brief introductory remarks.
I'm here in Grenada for the very first time. The experiences that I've had here in Grenada have confirmed in a very powerful way where we are headed, what the future of the entire planet ought to look like. This beautiful, powerful militant revolution. My sister Fania and I were so excited by what we saw. We were so struck by the enthusiasm of the, not only the leaders, but the everyday people. For us, Grenada, especially for Black people, really marked a new moment in history.
It just sort of captured the imagination of us. Here's a socialist government, a revolutionary government right here in our own hemisphere. I could already see the kind of wheels turning, Fannie's wheels turning. And the next thing I knew, she was, when we got back, she was packing you all up.
Really? I didn't know that. I thought we were only going to stay for like a couple of years.
No, I planned to live in Grenada.
Then what? Wait, hold on. Well, how long did we think we were going to stay there?
I was going to live there.
For good?
Mm-hmm. I'd planned to stay. I'd planned to live, I had moved to Grenada.
You didn't tell us.
You were 10.
There are so many parts to this story I'm just now learning. My parents had separated a few years before, shortly after my sister was born. But my dad lived just down the street most of my life, He was a firefighter. I had no idea that going to Grenada meant we wouldn't be seeing him anymore. Apparently, he didn't seem to know either.
There's an announcement that we're kind of going to Grenada. Right?
Right. And I said, okay, where's Grenada? So I had to look on a map.
How long did you think we would be gone?
That was another question.
Yeah.
That was another real question, because I didn't know. First few days, I was just kind of walking around looking at the walls, and
you can go.
And just realizing that you were gone.
With very little warning, my mother quit her job, said goodbye to family and friends, packed us up in 6 trunks to leave Oakland forever, and moved us to the island of Grenada.
Grenada is the southernmost of the Windward Islands in the West Indies. It's known as the Island of Spice, strikingly beautiful, about 21 miles long, 12 miles across, and with more than 100,000 people. Christopher Columbus discovered the island in 1498, and in the 17th and 18th centuries, it moved back and forth between French and British control. Grenada was the center of the British slave trade, ended by uprisings and final emancipation in 1833.
Grenada got its independence from Britain in 1974.
While Eric Geary was celebrating independence as Grenada's first Prime Minister, his political opponents were being rounded up by the secret police.
Geary ruled like a dictator. He controlled the press and radio, and was widely suspected of ballot rigging.
Under Geary, there were roads in the hole rather than holes in the road. So bad was the situation.
6 years ago, when Gary's power was at its height, Maurice Bishop and his fellow revolutionaries formed the Jewel movement. Jewel standing for Joint Endeavor for Welfare, Education and Liberation, a ragtag and bobtail revolution, headquartered in a radio station full of surplus BBC equipment. At 6 a.m., the People's Revolutionary Army captured the government-controlled radio station and began to broadcast.
Government of the criminal dictator Eric M. Geary has been overthrown. The entire army has surrendered.
Bishop is now the acknowledged leader of the Caribbean's second revolutionary government. This tall, handsome 35-year-old barrister is very much the people's choice.
Today, the people are enjoying many more democratic rights and freedoms and are much more involved and participating in the building of our revolutionary process.
The new government was just 3 years old when we jumped into this people's revolution. Bishop was a hero to me. He was my first black president. I remember shaking his hand and thinking, wow.
Friendship, solidarity, and cooperation among the people.
And Maurice Bishop and his family all knew you in kind, because we were introduced to them by Angela. And I was really happy that you were able to interact with a man of that stature. Not arrogant, just kind, gentle soul. To be part of that was unbelievable. To live in a country where there is a black prime minister and young black folks taking care of their own. I thought, what a good experience for my children to experience such a positive environment. It was a utopia.
Harry Belafonte singing about Grenada.
As morning breaks, the heaven on high, I lift my heavy load to the sky. Sun comes down with the burning glow, mingles my sweat with the earth below. Oh, island in the sun.
Lush as my grandmother's Louisiana, called the Island of Spice for its nutmeg. Grenada was a paradise.
Oh, island in the sun, build your
The World Bank reported a growth in Grenada's economy of 2% at a time when most of the other countries of the world were in an economic decline. Low-income housing is available for the first time. Healthcare is recognized as a right for all people. The National Women's Organization has secured laws guaranteeing such rights as equal pay for equal work and paid maternity leave. Grenadians are creating a new form of government which is more responsive to their needs than any they've ever experienced.
You would go down to the beach in the mornings because it was safe. I had no problems allowing you to get on a bike with a neighbor kid and go down to the beach in the mornings or try to go fishing or just adventure. It was no danger letting children just run and be children. In Oakland, you couldn't even get on the bus by yourself.
Yeah, that's right.
I caught the bus every day here.
We hadn't been back to Grenada since being airlifted out in 1983. I was on a mission to understand what happened and why we had to leave.
Seems so small. Wow. This one here. It was this here? No. This was it.
This one?
It was this one.
Yeah.
We used to take the water from here and fill up our tubs to bathe in. I had a little blue tub when I was bathing back.
As a kid, I remember playing in front of this house, in Prime Minister Maurice Bishop's front yard. And directly across the street was this house, where I played with the children of Deputy Prime Minister Bernard Cord and his wife Phyllis Cord, the Deputy Secretary of Information and Culture. Mrs. Cord was one of the many women leading the revolutionary government, and a family friend.
The movement of our women is part of the movement of all our people to extend the rights and the power of all our people in our society.
Jacqueline Kreft, the Minister of Education, was another friend who encouraged my mother to move to Grenada and teach. She also helped us find a home and a roommate. We lived with Yvonne, an artist, an educator, her 6-year-old son David, and a striped cat.
Actually, that cat was given to us by Jackie Kreft one day as well. A little kitten, she brought this ginger kitten to us. I wasn't expecting a kitten, but suddenly I saw her security car come up the drive to our house, and he says, Minister Kreft sent you this kitten.
Our home was walking distance to St. George's University. 800 American medical students were enrolled on the campus there, which sat next to the Grenadian government's most ambitious project. A new airport. President Ronald Reagan, he saw this project in a different way.
On the small island of Grenada, the Cubans, with Soviet financing and backing, are in the process of building an airfield with a 10,000-foot runway. Grenada doesn't even have an air force. Who is it intended for? The Soviet-Cuban militarization of Grenada, in short, can only be seen as power projection into the region.
It isn't nutmeg that's at stake in the Caribbean and Central America. It is the United States' national security.
Reagan had it wrong. It was not designed to be a military base, but to increase access for tourism.
The present airport is too small for cargo planes and for jets. The new airport will have a 9,800-foot runway, which is the minimum standard length set by international aviation authorities for the landing of jets. Private firms from the United States, Britain, and Finland have performed major parts of the construction work.
Oakland Congressman Ron Dellums spoke out in defense of Grenada.
Navy personnel as well as Air Force personnel stated unequivocally to me in direct response to questions that I raised. And their statement was that there is no military significance to this airport on the island of Grenada whatsoever.
This is the systematic campaign of destabilization, threats, and lies against Grenada.
We have to struggle as people who are being destabilized every day to get people out there to understand the really devastating effects of propaganda.
Grenada, that tiny little island, is building now a naval base, facilities for the storage of munitions, barracks and training grounds for the military.
After months of intense propaganda about the airport, Bishop went on a 10-day tour of the United States to dispel the misinformation. His requests to meet with President Reagan were ignored.
the numerous private and public assurances given by my government that we constitute no threat to the national security interests of the United States, or for that matter, of anyone else, should long ago have served to convince them that we are serious. And even letters which I wrote to President Reagan have not been responded to. However, once again in your presence here tonight, we repeat these statements. The peoples of our region and the peoples of the United States cry out with one voice for peace, for sanity, for justice, for dignity. Long live friendship between the people of the United States and Grenada. Long live peace in our Americas and in the world, forward ever, backward never.
I wanted to show you a picture of Morris when he was called to the bar. Morris went and hired some big suit. The wig, he never put it on. And,
the wig, or he had to wear a wig and everything? He had to wear a wig?
Yeah, when you graduate. Oh dear.
Sitting with Morris Bishop's mother, Alimenta Bishop, I learned that Morris's father, Rupert Bishop, was a union leader who fought against oppression under Gary's dictatorship. He was murdered in 1974 by the Gary regime.
This one is after my husband was killed. That was taken at the graveside. We had some procession and so on.
Shortly after his father's death, Maurice Bishop co-founded the New Jewel movement with Bernard Cord. He became a vocal opponent of the Gary dictatorship.
They used to beat him, but he never, not a word to me, never. They even flushed his head in a toilet once. He even said that to me. I used to leave here and go over to Morris and see him lie down with his head, dig the head. As soon as he see me, he say, "Als, I'm well, I'm strong, strong." He didn't want me to know. He's suffering at all.
Talking to Ma Bishop and revisiting places I'd known unearthed more questions. I thought returning to Grenada with my mother and Yvonne would give us some closure. It didn't. I didn't realize how open the wounds were. In Grenada, my mom thought we'd found our new home, a utopia. But after less than a year on the island, things began to fall apart. On October 13th, 1983, Maurice Bishop was put under house arrest. An unfamiliar voice came on the radio that day. It was the head of the military, attempting to explain Bishop's house arrest. My mother recorded the broadcast.
We have never spoken about these problems publicly. The truth is, our party has faced a serious problem, the constantly growing desire from Maurice Bishop to exercise sole and exclusive power. He has become increasingly hostile and increasingly suspicious that other members of the leadership may be trying to seize power from him. His suspicion focused on Comrade Bernard Cord. One of Comrade Bishop's security officers has given a sworn statement stating that Comrade Bishop had himself directed the rumor that Comrade Bernard Ford and his wife were planning to assassinate him. We see that Comrade Bishop was wrong. We agree that the party had to discipline him. The party understands our people are concerned about where Comrade Bishop is. NJM wishes to assure the people that Comrade Bishop is at home and is quite safe. Our people must also be on guard against any attempts to create panic and confusion. Sisters and brothers, long live the new jewel movement, long live the revolution, forward ever, backward never.
That was a statement was read by Comrade Hudson Austin, a member of the Central Committee.
We had a lot of propaganda from the military during the time of Morris's house arrest, denouncing Morris, saying that he was petty bourgeois and he wasn't interested in joint leadership. There were murmurs about Morris no longer being party leader.
What have they said to you? Have they, in fact, arrested Maurice, detained him, or charged him? What is the position?
Have him under house arrest, and I don't know exactly for what. It is so confusing now that I really don't know what to do.
All right, then. Thank you very much, Mrs. Bishop, for talking with us.
The day they put Morris under house arrest, one of the men that was with Code, they said, we have to ask this boy permission to go to see Morris. So I called mother. I tell the mother, she tell me, say that again, say that again. I heard stupidness. So I said, well, I'm told your son is the one to give us permission to go to see my son. Well, I didn't exactly know how terrible it was. So then he had a mark on his leg. I said, what's wrong with it? And he said, didn't want to say anything about that. So we all were very upset, you know, all those days. I don't know, and just things just keep on going from bad to worse.
I went and I saw him sitting there, and there were some people on his side, what you call them, they soldiers, and they didn't leave the room at all. We spoke, and they were there listening to everything. We brought him some cashew nuts, which he loved. They took them. They didn't let him take anything for himself. They took it. There were too many people working against Morris. He couldn't do a thing to save himself. He was outnumbered, I would say. Because I only went once to see him. Mom was braver than me. She went twice. But I was so upset, you know what I mean, Damani. I couldn't face him, especially as I had all these premonitions and so already. And I went that day, and I saw my brother sitting there, and I just felt I wanted to scream.
Destabilization. To cause a government to be incapable of functioning. Done successfully, it can happen without a trace. Why was the army suddenly in charge? Why were two friends who'd built the Grenada Revolution together now fighting?
People start saying there's a jump up, there's stuff happening in town. But I had been around enough chaos in the States that I knew that I didn't want to be part of that. I stopped at the market to get water and food. Of course, everybody was at the market buying water and food. And so we sat in the house and we just waited.
What did you think was going on?
We didn't know what was going on, but we knew it wasn't good.
On October 19th, 1983, the sixth day of Bishop's house arrest, tens of thousands of people gathered up the hill to free him.
They're all going to Maurice Bishop's house to demand his release. Ah, there goes the gate. People have torn the gate down. Look out! The shooting. That's another tank ahead. One that's firing. It's over the people's heads. Another tank. On the other end, they're firing. They got the people in between. I can't tell if they have him or not because I can't see. They say we leader. We leader. Where is he? They got him. They got Maurice Bishop. They got Maurice
Bishop freed from house arrest, thousands of people flooded from the market to Fort Rupert.
From here, it looks like they're taking the army base. You can see the smoke fire, and you can see the people coming down now.
Remember, we could hear the shots from the fort.
In the chaos, hundreds were injured, and many were killed, and 8 were lined up against this wall and executed, including Prime Minister Maurice Bishop.
An all-day and all-night curfew will be established for the next 4 days. Anyone violating this curfew will be shot on sight.
When we heard this Austin come out of the radio and say, what again? It was a curfew. Oh, we use the word, they couldn't even say it good. And how the two sides, they had what? Oh, they say
Crossfire.
a crossfire. Crossfire. And Maurice Bishop was killed. Jacqueline Creft was killed. Rarius Bain was all saying all who was killed. So Lord have mercy, my
There
brother.
was no crossfire.
My brother came to me and said, your son is dead, Lord. But you know, I couldn't cry at all. People say, how is that you don't cry? I say, what, it goes to the heart. I can't cry, you know, but it affects you.
A friend that I knew was killed, and 2 other friends that I knew well were being blamed for the murder. It was fear to know that the prime minister was killed, and then we'd heard all the things on the radio about Phyllis Court and Bernard Carter were involved in it. I knew to get my strength together and do the best I could to get out of that environment. I think our primary focus then was to try to get the kids out.
Our concern was not to scare the children, so we gave you the minimum amount of information. You kept on probing and asking, but when would we be going back to school? And we hadn't any answers. We couldn't give you any answers, really. It was a terrible time.
The Swedes and the Canadians all sent in ships to take their citizens out. And we asked the representatives from the American Embassy, are you going to do the same for U.S. citizens? And they said no. And so someone says, well, what happens if they start shooting? And the representatives of the American Embassy said, duck.
For 4 days, we lived under the shoot-on-sight curfew. My mother was trying desperately to get us out of the country. Why weren't we, as U.S. citizens, getting any help from the States? We would soon find out why.
All Grenadians are asked to come out and defend our country. United States paratroopers have invaded Grenada with helicopters. Conscious Canadian people are asked to block all roads and obstruct the enemy's progress. Are asked to report immediately to all respective militia bases. All doctors, nurses, and medics report to the hospital immediately. Our country is under attack.
From the first days of my presidency, I was aware of the growing trouble here in Grenada and what appeared to be an attempt to turn your island into a staging area for subversion and aggression. There is a freedom tide rising in our hemisphere. The spirit of democracy is assuming its rightful role as the great unifier of the people. Democracy is based on respect for the rights and dignity of every person, whatever his or her station in life. In free societies, people do not live in fear. They never worry that criticizing the government will lead to a late-night knock on the door and arrest by some goon squad. Argentina, Guatemala, El Salvador, and yes, Grenada have returned to democracy. Grenada, we were told, was a friendly island paradise for tourism. Well, it wasn't. It was a Soviet-Cuban colony being readied as a major military bastion to export terror and undermine democracy. We got there just in time.
There was a constant pounding and bombing and noise and, you know, and explosions and firing and shooting all around all the time. We were very concerned, we were panicked. We decided we'll just make the whole place safe, you know, for the children.
Yvonne had this large 4-post bed. We decided to take the mattress off of the 4-post bed and put the children under it and put the mattress over the windows in case there was glass shattering and you would be safe. And that's where we sat.
Here we were thinking, you know, this is for safety. You lot thought it was so much fun. This was now a den. And you just wanted to be in there, you know, this was your new play space, really. And that was quite good for us because it took the pressure off of us. So you stayed in that area, but the main emphasis on our part was we didn't want it messed up, you know, we just wanted you to be under there playing. You had the torches and stuff like that, and you know, thought it, and we gave you things to play under there, you know, board games and books and things like that to take the pressure off, you know.
I remember you asking me as the bombs dropped and the island shook, you said this must be what they call war.
After 3 nights of hiding under the mattress, from our window we saw a group of American medical students being evacuated by the US military. But we were being ignored. Our lives didn't matter. My mother and Yvonne realized that blending in with this group of students was our only chance to get off the island. We grabbed whatever we could, stuffed it in our backpacks, and left Grenada. I wrote my memories down in a letter that my mom has saved till this day.
The first day in Grenada, some rumors were going on in town. A lot of people got hurt. And then a big bang came from the crowd. A lot of ministers got killed, like the Minister of Education. After that, they had a curfew for 2 days. My mother woke me up really early and heard a lot of gunfire. They were dropping bombs. We slept under the bed for 3 nights. Then one day, some troops came to our house with big bombs and guns on their back. They said they were going to evacuate, so we only took 3 backpacks and walked to the airport. We had to walk 4 miles to the new airport. It wasn't even finished. When you do.
Back home, kids were watching G.I. Joe and had no idea what war really felt like. But my dad understood, and I told him everything. My friends and teachers at school thought I'd been rescued from some horrible place. The Grenada I knew didn't exist anywhere in the media. Later, I learned that no journalists were allowed on the island during the first 3 days of the invasion. So the only reporting came courtesy of the US military. This was how history was written.
U.S. forces expelled Cubans who were building Port Salinas Airport as a military staging area.
The warm welcome from many Grenadians added justification to the United States' decision to invade.
God bless America.
The success of the operation demonstrated the skill, dedication, and professionalism of the U.S. Armed Forces.
You owe one hell of a lot of thanks to these guys who went in that.
Hell of a job. Shaking hands with a real pro. Put their hand here.
Mr. President, you recognize you guys down here in Grenada.
If anybody back home has any problems with what the United States did, they can look at our lives and say they saved them, because that's exactly what happened.
I'm going to gladly pay my taxes for the rest of my life.
Yeah.
Do you think that the United States has the right to invade another country to change its government?
But I don't think it's an invasion, if I may answer that question.
As Reagan successfully sold his war, a new government was quickly put in place in Grenada, led by Sir Paul Schoon.
Sir Paul Schoon emerged to announce the interim administration.
Sir Paul said he was pleased with the results of the invasion.
I must say the Americans did a jolly good job. I would like them to remain here as long as it is necessary.
All members of the People's Revolutionary Army who do not report shall be considered as deserters and dealt with accordingly.
We are grateful to God today that Grenada is once again safely within the ranks of free nations.
Listening to news about Grenada, that was still sad. Folks who had not been there, folks who had made their own political interpretation, were totally off the wall and decided to tell me what happened. And at that point, I just decided not to participate in the conversations.
Ronald Reagan, the man the Grenadian people acclaim as being the major force behind restoring democratic government to the island. After pausing for a moment of silent prayer, Reagan then unveiled a plaque which expressed the gratitude of the Grenadian people to the United States and other Caribbean nations for liberating the island from communism.
I was not going to play politics with the lives of people on that island. It wasn't a political football to play with. It was a loss of friends and a loss of a utopian.
A year after the coup against Grenada's Prime Minister Maurice Bishop, 18 men and 1 woman had gone on trial charged with his murder. Cord, his army commander Hudson Austin, and the others face 11 counts of murder. In court today, they refused to plead.
The 1 woman among the 19 defendants, Mrs. Phyllis Cord, formerly the Minister of Culture, apparently fainted in the court. When she revived, lying in the dock, she shouted that she'd been on hunger strike for 6 weeks.
Phyllis, Bernard, and 15 others were sentenced to life in prison. In 1990, my mother received a letter from Phyllis.
What does it say?
Fire, flood, and earthquake have a way of disrupting the best of relationships, and the same is true of catastrophe, invasion, and imprisonment. During the past 7 years, I have often wanted to contact you, but you can probably imagine that it's been a wee bit difficult, to say the least. There's a lot of memories.
Eventually, Bernard and Phyllis Cord were released from prison. By 2009, all 17 accused of plotting the assassinations had been freed. The bodies of Maurice Bishop and the others murdered at the fort that day have never been found. Mrs. Bishop passed in 2013, but lived to see her son's name officially honored on the island by his daughter Nadia.
On behalf of the Bishop family, Alimenta Bishop, Maurice's mother, Anna and Maureen, his sisters, Angela, his wife, and his children, John and myself, I say thank you for recognizing and honoring Maurice Bishop by naming our airport the Maurice Bishop International Airport. And the powerful symbol of reconciliation that it represents.
I began to be bugged by the teaching of American history because it seemed that history had been accomplished without my presence, without my presence, without my presence.
I call the United States home. But this country has a painful legacy of violence that we still struggle to confront or even name.
Discussion. You must disperse immediately or be subject to arrest. Hands up!
Big house is their house, the owner house, the white man's house.
When we first moved into that neighborhood, we were the first black family. Someone left a note on the door that says, "We don't want you niggas here."
Two Black Panthers were shot to death. George Jackson, age 29.
Sentence 1 year to life. 1 year to life. Conspiracy in the land.
Why is it I'm put in a position where I can die?
Tried everything against Grenada, all the classic destabilization.
Major media spread the big lie.
Medical students were seeking to escape the island.
9 people are dead after a shooting at a historic African-American church in Charleston, South Carolina.
Officially running for President of the United States, we are going to make our country great again.
How is it possible that this is the world we're bringing our children into? I look at my son and I wonder, what do I teach him? Is this how things are supposed to be? What do I keep from him? The unimaginable endurance, hope, and strength my family found to push forward. I hope that's my inheritance. I hope I can pass that to my son. My ancestors were enslaved and taken from their home. My grandparents migrated from Louisiana to Los Angeles. My mother took me from California to Grenada and back. And that house on Coco Road in Geismar, Louisiana, where so many generations of my family have called home, that was once so beautiful, is now known as Cancer Alley.
The state's governor recently approved a plan to build one of the biggest chemical plants in the Western Hemisphere. Most of the residents living here are African American. Dioxin is a known carcinogen. State officials deny the plants pose a health
So, where is home?
It's not necessarily, for me, about finding a place, where we go and where there's a Shangri-La. It's creating it where we are. The migration isn't necessarily a physical thing. It's really the migration toward this vision of a future that is a beautiful one. And this is a great time for that, and for your son. We're there again. We're in a massive movement, and let's not let this moment pass.
And Mother, when we were very young, always encouraged us to imagine a better place. As children, when we were growing up in Birmingham, Alabama, the most segregated city in the South, there was no indication that things would ever be any different. But my mother always said that this is not the way things are supposed to be. And that simple message has remained with me. This is not the way things are supposed to be. And if we work towards change, conditions will become different. People accuse me of being an inveterate optimist, but I think we always have to find something that holds a promise. And in that way, we look toward the future. A great deal of change has happened. The very fact that we're able to imagine connections between struggles against racism, against imperialism and homophobia, discrimination against people who are differently able, against trans people, this is an indication that we've moved forward.
Now that I'm a parent, it's easier to understand the decisions my mother made for my future. She took a step forward into uncertainty, sure that anything would be better than the injustice she knew.
Teaching was more than just a job. Teaching was a passion. You don't blame the children because they're not learning. You figure out a way that you can teach them. I mean, you're committed to humanity, to making the world a better place. You know, not just for your family, for everybody's family.
But it was that simple?
Yeah, that's what it's about.
Yeah, but not everyone does that, though.
It's a personal need to develop a better world. I look for better in human beings. That's just who I am. I mean, I was always a kid in elementary school. If someone was hurt, I was always going over them, patting on the back, saying, oh, it's going to be all right. Mother tells me that. She goes, you were always one of those kids. I said, oh, really? She said, even when my brother would get hurt, I'd go and say, oh, he's going to be okay. You know, it's just who I am.
Continue boarding flight 1235 to Grenada, inviting our advantage gold, platinum, executive platinum,